Notre Dame adds to its incredible DB class. Clemson gets a big-time player from Atlanta. Georgia adds 2, and Baylor adds 3. On and on, we have commitments to discuss here on the Portal Podcast.
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back into the Portal Podcast, where you get your daily recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal scoop. I'm your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We have a lot to cover with a final big weekend of recruiting about to come to a close. I think it's safe now to at least report on the major commitments and what's trending for the programs that are probably close to done. There's always the chance of flips as we get into the season, but we are in a dead period, and with fall camp approaching, we are finally slowing down on recruiting. So I want to get everybody caught up. The latest commits is the biggest thing. Who's next on the board for a few schools, and finally, kind of where everybody is, what's needed for some of the classes. I'm just going to do a rundown in the second part of the show. So let's start with commitments. Notre Dame gets Nick Reddish, a safety out of Independence High School in Charlotte. You add him to Chasten Smith, Aiden Pouncey, Kari Adams, Joey O'Brien. Maybe the best DB class in the country, definitely the best balanced amongst the top. That probably, if you play Reddish at nickel, you could play all the other guys at other spots and have a full contingent. Mike Mickens is arguably the nation's best DB coach. He's one of the better recruiters too. Shout out to him for what he's accomplished. That is a very balanced class, and Notre Dame's conservatively going to finish in the top 10 of the recruiting rankings, quite possibly top 5. Clemson, they get Blake Stewart. That's a young man out of Atlanta, highly coveted. Miami, Georgia, and a whole bunch of other programs were after him. He ends up with Clemson. It had been a while since Clemson had won a big recruiting battle, but they always seem to get some kids out of Georgia. Dabo Swinney and his coaching staff, the back office people, the Clemson Tigers do a tremendous job all the time of recruiting the Peach State. It's their base, more so even than South Carolina or North Carolina. That's tough sledding because everybody recruits inside the Georgia borders, but Clemson is one of the very best. And outside of UGA itself, Clemson is probably the most successful program inside of that state. Next, let's talk about Baylor for a second. I didn't expect to be throwing them out, but not one, not 2, but 3 big-time commitments in a weekend. Dave Aranda and his staff, they went all in. And I don't think of Aranda as quote-unquote an elite recruiter. I don't know how much he has going on with the recruiting process. He's a successful coach, but they don't normally get guys like this. And take your pick on which one's the best, but I'm personally partial to Jordan Clay just because big-bodied receivers that can play the boundary, they can also stretch the field. He's a young man out of Madison High School in San Antonio. They're not common. And he had all the offers you would expect for a kid from the state of Texas and beyond. Elite prospect, probable top 100 by all the major recruiting services, myself included. I think he's going to be an impact player in Waco. Watch out for Jordan Clay. They also got Jamarian Carlton and Jalen Battle, 2 defensive linemen. Battle out of the state of Oklahoma, and Carlton, another kid from the state of Texas. Both were kids that had national offers. So 3 kids in one weekend for Baylor. That's awesome. I love to see a little bit more parity and some teams kind of step up in the Big 12. Obviously, there's a very convoluted list, depending on who you talk to, for who's going to win the Big 12 this year or just about any other. If Baylor continues to recruit like this, you'll hear them mentioned towards the top a little bit more often than not. Tennessee gets J.B. Shabazz out of East Forsyth High School in North Carolina. Offensive tackle, 6'6", 315. Going to talk a little bit about offensive tackle recruiting nationally here in just a little bit. Georgia gets Caden Prothrope, my top tight end in the country. I'll be talking about the tight end board that I have very, very soon. I'll have my list out now that all the commitments are done. I'll start doing some of those again. They also get Tyreek Green, a safety out of Buford. Prothrope is from Bowden Georgia 1A program that's won 3 consecutive state titles. I'm picking them to win a 4th, by the way. Auburn gets Adam Balagoon Ali here recently. Linebacker out of South Florida, out of Cardinal Newman. Good pickup for Auburn. They needed some recruiting momentum. He is a darn good player. Still waiting on Anthony Tank Jones to make his decision, but he has announced that Bama is the leader. Texas A&M and Oregon are the other two. Jones is a pass rusher out of Mobile, St. Paul's. He is a absolute fantastic athlete. He's a young man that I'd have taken as a sophomore in a heartbeat. I think he would have been at least borderline top 100 recruit as a sophomore in high school. That's how talented he is. If Bama gets him, they are probably going to end up in the top 5. And right now they, again, are trending. Syracuse, Cameron Hairston Taylor, an athlete out of Virginia, could play on either side of the ball. Fran Brown and his staff lighten it up still. Congrats to Syracuse. They have done a great job this year. Not just a good job, but a great job of capitalizing on their season. They were the darlings of last year's ACC race and became kind of a national story, especially after beating Miami late in the season. That is turning into a very good recruiting story for that franchise. And I do mean franchise. Like it's got some oomph to it now. It's not just Syracuse football. They've got some power behind their name. They're getting kids out of Florida, Virginia, Pennsylvania. They recently flipped a Penn State commitment. They're doing a good job. And I think they've got a chance to be a top 20 recruiting class when all is said and done. They'll at least be very close. Congrats to Syracuse. Ole Miss got Jet Goldsberry. I talked about him earlier this week. Just want to bring him up again. That is an all-around football player out of Southern Indiana, just outside of Evansville. He's a thumper as a safety. He's a great run-pass quarterback when he's on offense. Lane Kiffin and the Rebels are getting a really good football player. Houston got Jaden Warren today. This is the biggest news on July 13th. He is an absolute burner. Sub 10 to 100 meters at 6'2", almost 200 pounds. 10.18 is one of the times that I've seen for Jaden Warren. That is smoking. With the talent they're starting to bring in at the skill spots, obviously Keyshawn Henderson leads the way. Watch out for Houston in the not-so-distant future. Louisville gets Devontae Anderson, a safety out of West Orange High School on the northwest side of Orlando, one of the best prospects in Central Florida. Louisville's done a great job in the state of Florida for years, but they kind of get overlooked, and it's not talked about enough because it's so commonplace anymore. Watch out for Isaac Brown, by the way, the running back sophomore out of Homestead. He had a great year as a freshman. He's going to continue the tradition from the state of Florida for Louisville. Oklahoma, just want to bring this up. They still don't have an in-state recruit, which is really weird, but they picked up Tyler Ruxer, another kid from Southern Indiana, same high school as Goldsberry that's going to Ole Miss. He's out of Heritage Hills. His name, again, is Tyler Ruxer. He's a big tight end going to Oklahoma. We have Colorado. They get DeMonte Timms. He's an athlete that can play multiple spots. He's from Armwood High School on the edge of Tampa. And they also get Rodney Colton, a really good linebacker just south of Atlanta, one of the best prospects in the state of Georgia. Big pickup for Dion in both instances. Oklahoma State gets Landon Anderson. That's a young man out of Santa Fe High School in Oklahoma. Good defensive line pickup. That's something that Oklahoma State needed more of. Congrats to them. UF gets Hezzy Kent out of Brunswick, Georgia, a near 300-pound tight end. He is a really great athlete. They're still in it for DQ Forkba. It's no decision yet. I've heard it's down to UF and Michigan and Florida State and a handful of others, but still no decision, so we'll see where that goes. KJ Ford does commit to Florida. Big-time defensive line prospect out of Duncanville, Texas, near Dallas. Great young man to have on your roster because his upside is through the roof. ASU goes all the way up to Cincinnati and Princeton High School to get Landon Myrie, tight end, 6'4", 225 pounds. They beat out Florida State and others for him. LSU gets DeAnthony Lafayette, defensive end, out of Lake Nona High School in the southern part of Orlando. LSU has been known for pass rushers for a long time. That's what this young man can do. They're also probably my favorite for Darius Gray. No decision yet, but that's coming soon. And finally, Wilson Zaire. No decision yet. Still waiting between Bama, Auburn, and Florida State. He's from Germany originally. His brother played at Auburn as an offensive lineman, and like him, he's one as well. 6'6", about 285. Super athlete. Offensive tackles are always at a premium, and both Auburn and Florida State really need him. And quite honestly, Bama needs another one in this class too. his decision is important. When we come back, we're going to talk national landscape with recruiting here on the Portal Podcast. We've all been there, longing on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes into play. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with killer last-minute deals. If you like the opportunity to get your ticket price up front, not have any surprises, Game Time is the app for you. That's one thing that I hate, the switch at the cash register. There's nothing worse than seeing $20 and then coming up to the register and it's $35. Not with Game Time. You don't have to worry about that. So take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to get all your latest college football recruiting information, roster information, really, because we're this close to the college football season getting here and even closer to fall camp news with all the press conferences going on, Big 12 media days, SEC, all that stuff over the next couple of weeks if they haven't started already. This is finally a fun time of year. I'm all here for it. So final part here with recruiting. Where are you with whatever program you follow? Do you feel good about where they are? Let me give you a couple of hints on what you should be looking at if you're not sure. And even if you are, I want you to look at three things for your class. Again, whatever school you follow or whatever school you don't want to see be successful, check these three boxes. Quarterback, offensive line, defensive line. The programs that win generally have experience at those three spots. The key to having experience is quote unquote consistent recruiting, not just good players, but year in, year out, you get enough numbers. Here's an example. Offensive line. A friend of mine used to work at Michigan when Bo Schembechler was there. He told him no matter what, every recruiting class, I want 4 offensive linemen, and don't cheat me by giving me 3 and then tell me we're going to take a defensive lineman and move him over. I want 4 offensive linemen. If a D lineman comes over too, that's cool. 4 offensive linemen. Now, I don't know in today's era if that's the exact same way I would do it. It's debatable. More good players play on defense now than they used to in the 70s and 80s. Totally get it. But with that being stated, how well is your school recruiting offensive linemen? This isn't necessarily a great O-line class nationally. It's solid, but I don't think it's elite across the board. It's pretty good at some of the high-end tackle spots for sure. There's some really good tackles at the top of the board. Jackson Cantwell, I think, is as good an offensive tackle prospect as I've ever seen. But there are a lot of other players that are really good as well. And they're kind of spread out everywhere. Maybe the best O-line class could end up being LSU. They've got 4 in-state commits. And as I mentioned earlier, Darius Gray, a kid out of Virginia who's awesome. Maybe the best interior offensive lineman in the country. Grew up an LSU fan. Tiger's got a great shot there. Notre Dame's got a pretty good O-line class. I like Florida's. A&M's, Texas, a lot of these schools are close. Bama's got a couple good players. Georgia's got 3, but not many have enough to fill out a line or even have 4 out of some of the major programs. Clemson's O-line class is very, very good. Maybe the best interior group overall. I think that would be a safe bet. USC. These are some of them. But where is your school? Did they at least get a handful of guys that can develop? Because O-line is a developmental position. The guys they block, that's the same question. Minimum, did you get 3? That's minimum. Guys that are hand in the dirt, not that edge guy that stands up that plays linebacker 50% of the time. Hand in the dirt. And did you get a little balance? Maybe one guy that's 275 and up, that's going to be an interior guy. Maybe a pass rusher that was scouted and recruited heavily by the likes of like Texas or Ohio State. How many like that did you get? You don't necessarily have to get Carl Wilder, who I think is as good a defensive lineman as there is in the country, from California going to Ohio State. But did you get something along those lines to give you balance so you don't have holes later on down the road, 2-3 years from now, and your team can't stop the run on 1st and 10, and then it's difficult. And finally, the easy one. Did you at least get a good quarterback for your team's system? If you did not, that's a major miss. Every time you miss at quarterback, that next year, it's exponentially more important. You miss 2 years in a row at quarterback, that's no. You will falter real quick unless you get lucky in the portal. And with the way teams are now paying up to keep their players at their schools, tackles, defensive linemen, and yes, quarterbacks, you're going to see fewer and fewer quarterbacks go into the portal. And here's the other one. I don't know how this is going to go because of the court of law. College football coaches strongly favor, from what I'm told, going to one portal window. If that ends up being the winter portal window, meaning there's nothing that you can do if you have a spring injury or something, that's double uh-oh. If your quarterback gets hurt and you didn't have a good quarterback in the class behind it and you got to play like a redshirt freshman, your season can go down pretty quick. Consistent quarterback recruiting is very, very important. Now, one last thing. We are in July. This is a dead period. The next weekend that young men can visit will be the opening weekend of college football. The July 29th, 30th weekend, you're probably going to see a lot of really good players go over. We're blessed. That weekend has great games. LSU at Clemson, Texas at Ohio State, Alabama at Florida State, Notre Dame at Miami, just to name a few. And even games like all the directional schools playing it, big power broker programs, and there are going to be kids there too, but there's going to be some movement. I'm going to go ahead and throw out a prediction with this. There will be a flip or two between now and that point at the end of that weekend because some kids are going to come into a decision. They decided to leave home, at least now, but they're going to go to a local game and decide, I want to stay closer to home. Don't know who they're going to be. Clemson might pick somebody up. Maybe it's Ohio State, whatever. We're going to see some movement late August, early September. Thank you once again for making the Portal Podcast your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stop in. Make sure you come back and see us again. We're going to have more recruiting news on team site stuff. We're going to have more predictions with what's going on with recruiting. And I'm also kind of getting rolling now with recruiting slowing down with predictions for this season. Top 10 lists, best positions, team previews, all that kind of stuff right here on the Portal Podcast. Like, subscribe, and we will see you again soon on the Portal Podcast.